Thank you so much, and thank you to you and to Brigham Young University for inviting me to give a guest lecture here today. When I've been here some hours and attended the lunch and not the least the performance, I really wonder why I should come here and talk about internationalization of higher education, because I think you're much more clever to that than you are in Norway, but probably you want to hear my version of it, and certainly I will use my time to that. Norway, some of you know about the country, small country up in the northern part of Europe, 4.8 million people altogether, scattered over a quite long distance, very long coastline, and we are about, among those 4.8 billion people, we are about 200,000 students in universities and university colleges. We expect to have much more also in our own, among our own population, but we also are very much in favor of students from foreign countries. I will come back to that. Many, many years ago, I was traveling myself from Skien, Norway, by boat over to Connecticut, United States, to be a student at the college in New Hampshire. And I used more than a week on the travel over the Atlantic Ocean. It was the usual way to travel at that time. No, certainly I could have taken a plane, but this was also an experience. The year I had in the college in New Hampshire was a crucial year for me. I then get acquainted with sociology. I never knew about that before. And when I come back to Norway after a year, I started to study sociology after having been educated myself to also to a social worker. So I myself have a combination of a very practical work as a social worker and the more theoretical part of it, that is the sociology. That was a little about me. You don't have to travel around the world to understand that the sky is blue everywhere. The well-known German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe lived in an era when travel was considered an essential part of personal development. Craftsmen, artists, businessmen, poets, they all traveled if they could. And we are impressed by the distances they traveled several hundred years ago. In Britain, they call it the Grand Tour, when young men of wealthy background spend sometimes several years seeing the sights and taking in the cultures of Europe and beyond. Particularly if they wanted to be considered as cultural persons, this was an essential part of growing up. And yes, it is true. You don't have to travel around the world to understand that the sky is blue everywhere, and especially the sky is blue here in Utah. However, traveling around the world opens up your eyes to the differences that are also there. And I read that Utah State is very clever in all kinds of skills. I read in the Wall Street Journal today and also in a more local newspaper that your young pupils are scoring very high on an SAT test. And I'd just like to quote Lawrence Boonin, Senior Vice President at the College Board, to say, "Our data shows that the American dream is alive," he says. "If you apply yourself, take hard courses, and do well, you will be ready for college." And the American dream is alive. We all know and have heard about the American dream, and this is also about traveling, both physically traveling, but also traveling as you educate yourself. In the modern world, we have no means to reach each other across national boundaries in politics. We have the means to reach each other across national boundaries in politics, in industry, in trade, culture, and so on. But when Tokyo and Buenos Aires is just a phone call away, when we jet into Chicago to sign a deal, it is fundamental to have this knowledge about differences, the broader mind that keeps us alert to the different meanings of immediately, or how important it is to save face, or how to interpret an invitation. Here lies the insight that greases the wheels and makes friends across the world. As topic for this lecture, I've chosen a theme which is high on the political agenda in Norway, internationalization of education. And then you have a combination of the journey you do when you're out traveling and the journey you do when you educate yourself. And my mission today is to give a presentation of how Norway deals with internationalization of education, emphasizing intercultural dialogue and diversity. My government submitted a white paper on the matter to the Norwegian Parliament last year. In the same year, we submitted a white paper on research, which also emphasizes the importance of international cooperation. This highlighting of international cooperation in Norwegian higher education and research policies is an acknowledgement of the fact that Norway needs students who understand about differences and students who have a global perspective. My government works systematically to include cross-cultural knowledge and, if possible, experience at all levels of our education system. For most of our students and pupils, that has to happen in the classroom in Norway through exposure to differing points of view and differing geographic and cultural perspectives, just in the same way as you all are used to, I think. But some are so lucky as to go out and see for themselves. As an alternative headline for my presentation, I could have chosen, "Should I stay or should I go?" That some of you will recognize as a song from 1981 by the British punk rock group The Clash. Together with the penguins who wonder if they should dare to cross over to the next ice raft, I think this illustrates almost everything about internationalization. Each of us has to decide whether to stay at home, close the door and hope to make the best of it, or dare to jump and join the others. But do we really have a choice? As you can see from this perspective, Norway is almost equally long north and south of the Arctic Circle and situated on the outskirts of Northern Europe. It therefore goes without saying, we shouldn't stay, we had to go. Historically, we have always been well connected to the outside world when it comes to trade and political alliances, and beginning with the Vikings. They traveled far away. Norwegian society itself has, however, been relatively homogeneous until about 30–40 years ago. This changed in the early 1970s, when the first large groups of non-European immigrants came to Norway in search of work and a better and more prosperous future. They were mostly from Asian countries like Pakistan, and they were just like Norwegians. For instance, Norwegians come to the United States some generations ago. Many Norwegians come here to Utah, and many Norwegians come to Dakotas and Montana as other typical states with with Norwegian heritage. For those of you studying Norwegian literature, there is an author named Arne Garborg. He lived from 1851 to 1923, and he was very, very concerned at the time, around 1900, about all the most clever Norwegians that left Norway and went to America, the beloved land, the land everyone wanted to go to. Because what about Norway when all the most clever persons left? He was very concerned about this. I will come back to Arne Garborg. But since the 70s, when Norway started to get immigrants, the number has grown very rapidly. As a result, Norwegian society today, particularly in big cities like Oslo and Bergen, is very different from what it was only a few decades ago. To Norway, success in international cooperation and competition in education and research depends on how successful we are in intercultural dialogue and understanding. Norwegian policy is to teach and prepare everyone to be intercultural citizens already from early childhood. As a very small nation with a small and little language, we have to do that to survive. The reason is, of course, the significant change in the demographic profile and the growing globalization and internationalization in the areas of finance, trade and labor markets, and of course also within culture and education and research. Today, 10% of the inhabitants in Norway are immigrants. In our capital, Oslo, the number is 25%, coming from different parts of the world. In primary schools in Oslo, more than 120 languages are taught, and some schools alone have up to 80 languages represented. 1/3 of the pupils have minority background, and the number of immigrants is increasing, especially from the non-West European countries. This rapidly growing mix of culture is highly valuable, but also a challenge to our society, our minds, and our way of living. That is why it is important to integrate international and intercultural perspectives in our education system. Norwegian enterprises, too, are more international than ever and need a workforce who knows how to work internationally, both at home and abroad. So far, much has been done, but there is still a lot of work to do in order to meet the challenges of a globalized society and a globalized labor market. Not at least with the oil and gas industry, it has been a very big internationalization in Norway. Norway is a welfare state and is doing well in many areas. However, our future prosperity will be based on less on oil and less on basic use of raw materials and other commodities, more on skills and know-how. We have to live out of the knowledge and what we learn and what we educate us to. To survive, we have to compete and cooperate with relevant actors abroad. As a small country, we just have to admit that most of the world's knowledge production takes place outside Norway, and it is vital for the development of Norwegian society that we can benefit from knowledge generated elsewhere. Therefore, we must aim at being an interesting partner for other countries, and that our education institutions are of interest to institutions abroad. In some areas, we believe that we really are good and an equal partner also for countries bigger than ourselves. And I've actually learned here in Utah, be small, think big. So we have something in common there. In some areas, we are even excellent with expertise that makes our institutions highly attractive partners for highly prestigious institutions abroad. Historically, Norway has collaborated mostly with our Nordic neighbors, a few other European countries, and with North America. But as the world is changing, when it comes to trade patterns, education and research, we must constantly ask ourselves, should we stay or should we go? New and strong economies are emerging, and a key to good life lies in excellent education and superior research. Maybe we have good connections already, but like most other countries, we have to rethink opportunities and measures, strategies and partnerships. Norway is an active partner in many international processes in higher education. One of the most important processes going on in Europe is the Bologna Process, in which Norway has been a partner from the very beginning, that we see since 1999. The Bologna Process is a pan-European process which requires some explanatory remarks. The original goal of the process is to develop a European higher education area within the year of 2010. At last year's ministerial meeting in Belgium, the year 2009 then, it was decided to continue the cooperation for another decade until 2020. The content of the process includes the adoption of comparable degrees, a joint system of credits, promotion of mobility for students and academic and administrative staff, and cooperation on quality assurance. There are now 47 member countries in the Bologna Process, practically all Europe. And I think you see about all Europe on this map. Norway is an active partner in the Bologna Process and a leading country in Europe when it comes to fulfill the Bologna goals. The process affects the global higher education market. With the harmonization of the higher education systems among the member countries, the European higher education area promotes mobility between the European countries and gives new competition, for instance, to US higher education institutions, which have traditionally recruited many European students. It is also interesting to observe that similar processes have started up in other parts of the world, for instance, the Brisbane process with Australia and its neighbours, and in Francophone Africa. In addition to the broad involvement in the Bologna process, we participate in numerous European education and research programs and projects, and we also have a long-standing close cooperation with the Nordic countries, as I mentioned. Moreover, the involvement in activities with other countries and areas of the world is rapidly increasing. In the last couple of years, I have signed agreements, so-called memorandums of understanding on higher education cooperation with new strategic partners countries like China, India, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Russia. And these countries are also important partners within research cooperation. And this represents new dimensions. And illustrates, I think, that the change of perspective and measures in our international relations is quite extensive. All in all, the international orientation in higher education and research has changed dramatically over the last few years. As mentioned, this is due to changes in our own society, as well as to increased globalization, which called for new analysis and new approaches to internationalization of education. And when the white paper of this topic was written, it was really high time to sum up and to evaluate the situation. One of the main goals was to present and discuss the full picture of internationalization in education, and we made some strategic choices as to where to go next in order to ensure that the Norwegian education system provides pupils and students with the necessary skills to act and to interact in an increasingly globalized world. So here you see the process on the white paper to the Parliament. Internationalization must be integrated in a whole education system, from primary and secondary education and training to post-secondary and higher education, including research education. And this was the first time a Norwegian government developed a white paper which has such a holistic approach to the topic. However, in this presentation, I will focus on the higher education level. As I have already indicated, internationalization of education and international cooperation is not new in the Norwegian context. Norway has traditionally had many students taking their higher education abroad. Earlier, this was necessary because of lacking capacity. Today, the capacity in higher education is sufficient, but we still want Norwegian students to go abroad, either for a full degree at a foreign university or on exchanges or placements as part of their Norwegian degree. The reason is that studies abroad add value both to our higher education system and to Norwegian society and labour market, as the students gain a different perspective, international experience, language skills and cultural understanding. In order to stimulate student mobility, we can boast of one of the most generous financial support schemes for students. And here I'm really proposing to all young people that want to think about this. I will come back to this later, but I would like to mention that in the study year 2009-2010, Norway had about 13,000 full degree students abroad, while over 77,000 students took part of their Norwegian degree abroad. This means that about 10% of the total Norwegian student population was abroad. Norwegian researchers too have always kept an international approach. However, when discussing internationalization and international cooperation in higher education today, We see this in a larger context than student and staff mobility and individual cooperation on research projects. International perspectives, languages and cultural awareness are increasingly important competencies for those seeking employment. Internationalization of education, therefore, should not only focus on students and staff spending a certain number of semesters or years abroad. What is generally called internationalization at home is also very important, meaning that the education provided in Norway should be international in character and competitive with respect to quality standards. In order to do so, study programs in Norway must be evaluated to make them internationally attractive, both for international and Norwegian students. The vast majority of Norwegian students still do not study abroad at all, and they must be provided with high quality and internationally oriented education at home. In our internationalization policies, quality of education is emphasized in addition to the overall value of visiting foreign countries and institutions. Last but not least, our new strategic partner countries make it even more important to stress languages and culture awareness. Many of the new countries has new languages. English is a very common first or second language to Norwegians, but going to China and to Russia, that is more complicated as regards the language. But I want to see these results in the years to come. Increased quality in the Norwegian education system. Quality is a guiding principle for internationalization of education in our country, both with respect to studies abroad and in the development of the provisions in Norwegian education institutions. It is necessary with attractive institutions for international students and researchers. Norwegian education institutions will be more attractive to foreign students and academics. Today, more than 3,500 foreign language courses and study programs are offered, mostly in English, but more than 200 master's programs are taught in English, and more than 200 master's programs are taught in English, yes. And the number is increasing every year. These master's programs are of importance both in attracting international students and academics and in offering international study programs to Norwegian students. Internationalization will concern all students and academic staff in Norwegian education institutions and not exclusively those who have the opportunity to go abroad. The administrative and technical staff will also be prepared and trained to deal with the internationalization of their own institutions. Students staying in Norway will meet an international campus with foreign students, teachers and researchers, and with international perspectives included in the curriculum. Students at the master's and doctorate levels will also participate in international research cooperation. And as to be an attractive partner, cooperation between Norwegian education institutions and education institutions abroad will be even more strongly emphasized, including cooperation with institutions in developing countries. Norwegian institutions will be seen as attractive partners to foreign universities. That is my main goals, and that is the work the things we are working with right now, after the discussion we had in the Parliament. Norwegian higher education went through a quality reform in 2003. The first evaluation of the reform shows significant progress towards the goal regarding internationalization at home, including the establishment of more international campus and with respect to student and staff mobility. The quality reform is inspired by and includes the action lines of the Bologna Process. Part of the reform was that all Norwegian students should be entitled to a study period abroad as part of their degree. Today, I'm proud to say that more than 30% of all Norwegian graduates have a mobility period abroad as part of their degree. We also see an increasing number of foreign students to Norwegian institutions, which is most welcome. To further stimulate student mobility, Norwegian higher education institutions are entitled to a minor sum of money from the Ministry of Education and Research for each incoming and outgoing students as part of their framework allocation. So we actually give the institutions money to go international. I should maybe add that about 85% of all students in Norway attend public, that is state higher education institutions. We have very few private institutions on that level. From now on, it will be important to focus even more on structure, involvement, collaboration with higher education institutions abroad, and to associate internationalization with strategic development of the institutions. I firmly believe that we have found measures which will lead us towards this, and I will elaborate on a few of them. First, projects and programs for development of joint degrees and study programs on master's and doctorate levels. This means that two or more institutions from different countries join forces in order to draw synergies from each other's expertise to offer high-quality joint study programs. Some academics are quite experienced in these kinds of projects, whereas others are not. The aim now is to initiate more joint projects. There are many successful examples of joint degree projects within the EU, Erasmus Mundus program, and under the auspices of Nordic Council of Ministers. And secondly, so-called tuning projects. This means that institutions cooperate and evaluate each other's qualifications, expectations, study content and results, as well as learning outcomes and structures. This is a form of cooperation that goes to the core in terms of unveiling ways of thinking and choices of values, as it necessitates systematic and thorough comparison with other institutions. Therefore, it is known to lead to quality improvement for all institutions involved. And third, pilot projects for internationalization in professional programs at the bachelor level, first and foremost programs for engineers, for health workers, nurses, and for teachers, not the least. This is where we have found most difficulties in terms of introducing mobility exchange possibilities. This has several reasons, for instance, cultural and difficulties in liberating time for mobility during the course of studies. Special measures are called for, as practically all graduates from these programs will need intercultural skills in their professional lives, for instance as a teacher. Hence, it is crucial that international and intercultural perspectives are included in their education and training. And fourth, linking higher education and research cooperation. It is important to gather knowledge and experience of how both education and research can benefit from closer cooperation. We will explore various opportunities and models. The aim is that the students too should benefit from international research collaboration. It is crucial not to lose sight of the recruitment aspect of the obvious link between researchers and their students. It is this link that will help us to ensure the future recruitment of young talents to research and academic career. And also there we have been especially aware of the teacher's education, that it is necessary to have contact with the research going on. The last measure I want to describe in some detail concerns conducting research on effects, best practice and other issues in internationalization of higher education. We simply need to know more and to systematize what is already known for everyone to use. The higher education institutions must be encouraged to cooperate more closely to share international experiences and best practice on internationalization at home. Some of our universities and university colleges are strong enough to attract quality partners abroad without any help. Others, particularly the smallest, neither have the ability nor the resources necessary and would benefit from closer cooperation with fellow national partners, including financially, to improve internationalization. And I try to encourage them to that. Provided they cooperate and find a sensible division of work and responsibilities, my belief is that the small higher education institutions could become attractive to quality institutions abroad as a network, as many of them have exciting profiles and study programs, and many of them, as this university here, are located in wonderful natural conditions. As I stated earlier, Norway has quite a few students who participate in mobility programs as part of their Norwegian academic degree. The reason is simply that Norway has one of the best state funding possibilities in the world for international student mobility. Norwegian students are in fact entitled to the same amount of money to cover living expenses whether they are studying in Norway or abroad. And since Norway is a high-cost country, as some of you know, Norwegian students generally live well on the financial support they receive when they go abroad. And usually when I meet Norwegian students abroad, they tell me they have really enough money and have a good time. And that's not so often you can hear that from students. The students are free to choose whatever country, university or study program they like, as long as education is recognized and can be considered to be at the same level as Norwegian higher education. In addition, the state will give loans and grants to cover a fair part of any possible tuition fees and travel costs. Even extra grants might be granted to cover expenses in connection with studies at high-quality institutions. International student mobility should be based on quality. Therefore, it is a goal to increase the number of Norwegian participants in quality students exchange programs and at prestigious foreign universities. This again presupposes a high standard of information and guidance about quality study abroad opportunities. Studies abroad will continue to have high priority, especially student exchange and degree studies at master level graduate students. We plan to adjust the financial support scheme for tuition fees in order to make it financially more attractive to study at foreign institutions of high quality. Basically, we want to give larger grants to cover tuition fees at institutions of high quality. And to put this into perspective, in Norway, most higher education is public and free of charge for the student, that is paid by Norwegian taxpayers. Choosing to study abroad in countries with tuition fees therefore often adds expenses that the students wouldn't have had at home. That is why this is provided for by the public financial support scheme. All in all, the white paper on internationalization introduces 40 different measures. They reflect those that were identified as the most important ones after the extensive consultation among education players and stakeholders. It is interesting to note that many other countries have a similar situation when it comes to internationalization of education. However, the point is not to make all education systems similar, but more transparent, and not all study programs like copies of each other, but all to be of high quality. That includes, most definitely, an international perspective and intercultural understanding. So if we work hard and smart, the question will no longer be, should I stay or should I go, but rather, where do I go and when? Every country and every higher education institution must find their own way of dealing with internationalization in education and research. Norway has chosen an approach adapted to our needs. The most central actors in reaching our goals are, of course, the educational institutions. However, also the Research Council of Norway and the Norwegian Center for International Cooperation in Higher Education have key roles in the internationalization of research and higher education. The Research Council supports international research cooperation and facilitates mobility of researchers both to and from Norway. SIU, the other organization I mentioned, supports the higher education institutions in their efforts and also has the central task of promoting Norway as an education and research destination in order to attract more students and researchers to Norwegian higher education institutions. As I said earlier, we have become more strategic in our approach, and one of the strategic priorities we have made is to increase the higher education and research cooperation with the United States, especially North America, in both with Canada and United States. My ministry has adopted strategies to support this, and I will round up my lecture by elaborating a little on the 2008 to 2011 North America strategy for higher education cooperation. It is 4 elements in the strategy: cooperation at government level, strengthening of student exchange, establishment of partnership schemes, and strengthening of information and networks. The goal is that the strategy will result in increased transatlantic cooperation between universities and university colleges, more partnership, and a growing number of students taking full degrees or participating in exchanges in the US and Canada. And the strategy is supported by funding. This far we find the results with regards to the US very satisfying. Norwegian higher education institutions are eager to form partnerships with American institutions. There are many reasons why US institutions have a central place as collaborators and knowledge sources for Norwegian academic institutions. Your institutions here are predominant as regards innovative power and knowledge development. Leading researchers throughout the world benefits from the network they have built up through the contact with US academic institutions, where they derive new inspiration from collaboration on research and higher education. You are really high class and have been many, many years. The resources available at major US research institutions place them in a class of their own. The universities have some of the best educational provision available. And we want the collaboration to work on different levels: common research, mobility of students and staff, cooperation on curricula, common modules, common education programs, joint degrees, and so forth. The US is an attractive destination for Norwegian students. In 2009-2010, there were about 1,000 Norwegian full-degree students in the US and about 1,100 students taking a part of their degree at the US higher education institution. This means that we have more than fulfilled our initial goal, which was to reach 600 full-degree students and 600 exchange students in the US at the bachelor's level. This should, of course, not be interpreted to mean that we don't want to see higher numbers. It's nothing better than to overfill the goals. However, the Ministry's focus will now be to increase the number at master's level, both among full degree and among exchange students. As internationalization should work both ways, another goal is to increase the number of American students coming to Norway. All known numbers are still very small, too small, about 300. The statistics show a good trend. Naturally, one of the purposes of my trip to Utah is to promote our strategy and to promote Norwegian higher education institutions as attractive partners for American institutions. And as for you students, I will encourage you to seek study abroad possibilities. You should go. Maybe some of you will choose Norway. And I really know now, after having been here some hours, that you do that. You choose Norway and you go. And that's the reason why maybe you knew some of the answers of what I'm lecturing about. But if you come to Norway, also you that have not been there yet, you will find that the sky is blue there as well, at least every once in a while. And in the summertime, the sky actually is blue all night also, in addition to all day. However, by being there, you will have a chance to experience the differences between Norway and the United States, including important differences in the higher education and research system. And after your stay there, you will bring your experiences back with you. It will change you, or at least influence you, and hopefully your experiences will have an impact also on others. And I'm sure now that you are, among maybe other things, thinking about our system with no tuition. And that is a very good thing for students, and I really appreciate that we have it also to could be able to offer to foreign students. I will return to the Norwegian writer Arne Garborg, because money is not everything, and you know that very well. And Arne Garborg, he once wrote something that is in Norwegian is named Om penger, and it is about money. And it's translated to English, and I will read that to you. This is written about 100 years ago. Money has no value in itself. You cannot eat it, not drink it, not dress yourself with it. You can have your pocket full of money and still be hungry, be thirsty, and freeze to death if there's no food, nothing to drink, no clothes to obtain. Money is not the supreme good in life, not the next best either, but it is a great benefit for a person who can use it sensibly. For money you can buy everything, they say. No, you cannot. You can buy food, but not appetite, medicine, but not health, soft beds, but not sleep, knowledge, but not wisdom, cosmetics, but not beauty, luxury, but not well-being, fun, but not joy, friends, but not friendship, servants, but not loyalty, grey hair, but not honor, restful days, but not peace. The shell of everything you can buy, but not the core. Money cannot buy that. Thank you very much for listening to me.